TPUSA is not really a movement, but they're able to put on these Super Bowl style extravaganzas because they have so much money. Without Charlie Kirk as their charismatic frontman, they don't really have any convincing figure who's directly affiliated with their organization. What there are a series of avaricious grifters who are carrying out very profitable venture where they're raking in tons of money off of the tomb of Charlie Kirk and then channeling it through a series of LLCs to either conceal the donors or to conceal how much they're paying themselves, also through a series of ghost or shell nonprofits that have no employees in order to pay themselves eye-popping salaries. I mean, that's something that took place when Charlie Kirk was there, but now they don't. They're like a very profitable ghost ship. They've installed Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica Kirk, as the CEO so that they can just keep coasting off his name. But at all of their major events, they need to fill the seats by bringing highly influential celebrity MAGA personalities. So whether it's JD Vance or they recently had Eric and Laura Trump. Who else have they had? Glenn Beck. And that's what they need to do in order to fill the seats, which will justify their own salaries because it looks like they're doing something important. And it does need to be said that these events register a lot of people for the Republican Party. But none of these speakers compare to Tucker Carlson. When Tucker Carlson's on stage, they're guaranteed to fill up the event, to generate lots of media. And that's why no matter how controversial Tucker Carlson gets, TPUSA has to keep him on board. And for Tucker Carlson, no matter how controversial he wants to be, how many attacks he's going to withstand, he can pretty much say whatever he wants and still maintain credibility as a major conservative influencer who is propelling the Republican Party forward as long as he has this connection to TPUSA. So Tucker Carlson is going to speak at TPUSA's major event in December. And I think that will be seminal because there will be a lot of attacks incoming. There's been a lot of pressure to get them to pull his card. But will he continue to speak at their events in 2026? That's a question. And I know there's pressure from some of the local chapters in TPUSA to cancel Tucker Carlson from some of the more Zionist chapter presidents who are more under the control of the pro-Israel faction.
How do they see JD Vance, Max? Because we had JD Vance talking at TPUSA addressing. He was asked by one of the young people in the crowd, why are we supporting Israel if they're not so kind to us and they want to control the U.S. foreign policy? What is the meaning of supporting Israel? He was asked, and he tried to answer politically. But in the aftermath, we've seen that the Zionists are attacking JD Vance. Who's JD Vance to Israel, and how do they feel really about it?
Well, the context here is that these TPUSA events, young members of the Groypers, the movement that follows Nick Fuentes, who are anti-Israel from an America First point of view, and fairly anti-Jewish as well, religiously sectarian. They have been seeding the audience with their members and challenging these high-profile MAGA personalities, including Eric Trump. One of them asked Eric Trump, your dad is basically taking $230 million in bribery from Israel. How can you call yourself America First? And the response from Eric Trump or Glenn Beck or JD Vance is pathetic. They're obviously not passionate about the pro-Israel cause. They do feel embarrassed. They're not accustomed to these kinds of questions because they never get them on Fox News. And JD Vance frightened the Zionist elite that has been controlling the Republican Party on these issues with his responses to a young Groyper who asked him about ethnic cleansing in Gaza and said, Jews are not our allies. He said he didn't even challenge the idea of ethnic cleansing in Gaza. JD Vance is not actually personally very passionate about Israel. You could tell actually when he went to Israel as the babysitter to try to keep the momentum up to enforce this weak ceasefire that Trump inaugurated. JD Vance did not kiss the wall. He didn't go to the Western Wall this time. He wound up in a conflict with the Israeli Knesset, which passed a law calling for the annexation, or a resolution calling for the annexation of the West Bank, and JD Vance called it stupid. But at the same time, look at who's pulling JD Vance's strings. It's the PayPal mafia, Peter Thiel, these Zionist tech overlords who have helped fuel his career. And, he has these fixers in the Republican Party who are incredibly pro-Israel, like Arthur Schwartz. So which way will JD Vance go? There's no way you can chart a middle path. JD Vance has tried to market himself as sort of a restrainer, someone who's a realist on foreign policy, but you can't chart a middle path in today's GOP with the preponderance of power of these Zionist donors like Adelson and Bernard Marcus and Ike Perlmutter on the issue of Iran or the issue of Israel-Palestine. There's no middle ground that you can chart. You either are totally with them or you're Tucker Carlson and you're totally against them. And Tucker Carlson, by the way, is a friend of JD Vance's. That's public knowledge. So if JD Vance tries to pursue any path for a two-state solution or something seemingly moderate, the Zionists will see him as an enemy and they will attempt to prevent him from winning the 2028 nomination. And that's Marco Rubio's angle. Marco Rubio is completely with them. He himself is a creature of the pro-Israel lobby whose career has been funded and fueled by Paul Singer. Paul Singer is basically his pimp, the vulture capitalist from Elliott Capital Management, who is ferociously pro-Israel. And so Marco Rubio will take that donor class with him against JD Vance unless JD Vance just bows down and obeys.
How do you see the role of Tulsi Gabbard? We know that she was trying to assess the Epstein file or maybe the Charlie Kirk situation with the case of Charlie Kirk, but she was ignored. And is there any sort of differences? As we see from outside, it seems that there is some sort of fractures, some sort of differences within the Trump administration. How do you see the difference between Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have any influence. I mean, she's kept out of meetings. She was kept out of the key briefings on Iran's nuclear program during the run-up to the 12-day war, which Trump now acknowledges he personally authorized after Rubio, who chairs the NSC, directs the NSC, and is Secretary of State, said, no, Israel acted unilaterally. Trump has now said, no, we authorized Israel to do that. By the way, come negotiate with us. And Tulsi Gabbard was kept out of all of the important meetings. She is the director of national intelligence. It looks like to me she's been used. She was used to campaign for Trump as a former Democrat, to say, I saw the evil of the Democratic Party and Donald Trump is right. She's a charismatic person who has a commanding presence and an impressive background. And now that she's in the administration, there's very little she can do to counteract the gears of the neocon war machine, which now has the largest and most advanced U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, in the Caribbean, ready to attack Venezuela. Tulsi Gabbard played an important role in helping to trigger this military show of force through an intelligence deception, which I consider to be the WMD deception of the Trump war on Venezuela. She declared that Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was in fact directing this mostly defeated Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, and was using it to invade the United States through the migrant invasion. This was Trump's narrative during the campaign, and it's the underpinning of the Trump administration's designation of Nicolas Maduro and the Venezuelan government as narco-terrorists, which justifies this war. Tulsi Gabbard contradicted a declassified U.S. intelligence briefing, which found that Maduro had no connection to Tren de Aragua, was not involved with it. In fact, his security forces had been battling it. And she fired the 2 U.S. intelligence officers or researchers who authored that report in order to pave way for this phony designation of Venezuela as narco-terrorists, which is justifying the killing of people on fishing boats in the Caribbean and may soon serve as justification for strikes inside Venezuela. So this is someone who personally opposed the U.S. attack on Venezuela, criticized U.S. sanctions on Venezuela, made her name condemning U.S. threats against Iran, the U.S. Saudi British war on Yemen. She has now walked back everything she ever said in order to hold this position under Trump, in which she is kept out of key meetings. And that, to me, seems very unprincipled.
With the case of Venezuela, the main objective, Max, in Venezuela, do you think is that the oil and the resources of Venezuela? Because if that's the case, the United States can get them, can make a contract. I don't know. Venezuela would be willing to sell their oil to the United States. But it seems that Donald Trump wants something beyond that. What is that? What is the main objective in Venezuela? Which we know that Tulsi Gabbard, as you mentioned, came out and said the regime change is not going to benefit the United States. The history says that to us. But as you mentioned, she's totally out of the circle, decision makers in Washington.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who is personally sanctioned by Trump for criticizing his murder of Colombian citizens through the U.S. military in the Caribbean Sea, recently declared that Trump is seeking to distract from the Epstein files and that a network of pedophiles is using the U.S. military to distract from their own crimes. Hey, maybe it's that. There's an ideological component. Marco Rubio and the Gusano industrial complex in southern Florida are obsessed with regime change in Venezuela. They want control. They want to go back to, they want to use America and the American military and American service members to help them take control of the countries that ejected them because they were a parasitic class element. There's that. Donald Trump wants to secure Florida as a base for Republican Party national electoral control. I mean, Florida's already seemingly a solidly red state, so I'm not sure what kind of factor it will be in 2028, why Trump needs to do that. But it really does come down to, I think for Trump, something transactional. It's always about greed. This is just about pure greed. He thinks that he can capture Venezuela's resources. Maria Corina Machado is the de facto leader of the Venezuelan opposition and is pretty much the embodiment of a corporate whore at a recent business conference in South Florida, which is actually run by the Adam Smith Freedom Center at Florida International University, where Juan Guaido is professor. A guy with no academic experience. I don't know if he's teaching a class in coup plotting or what, but that'll give you a sense of the kind of place that hosted her. She promised to open up Venezuela's shores to developers, to give out contracts to U.S. businessmen, and to privatize the oil sector and to fork over Venezuela's minerals in a really bizarre speech where she seemed like the kind of multinational corporate concierge to Venezuela's wealth. And the IMF has been having meetings along with international banks on Venezuela, on plundering Venezuela. But if Trump carries out these strikes and starts grinding down the Venezuelan military over the course of weeks and months, Venezuela will be destabilized. There'll be a migration crisis. There could be some kind of civil war. And it's not exactly the environment where a risk management expert will tell you want to invest. So, if you're thinking of plundering Venezuela and you're watching this right now, pay me as a risk management expert to tell you that it's not going to work out very well. Your contracts are not going to be, it's not going to be a very good investment. and there are these shadowy figures, sleazy figures close to Trump, who've worked in and out of the administration, who have formed these different consulting firms to try to rake in contracts in the day after Maduro. One of them is called Javelin Advisors. Another one that's no longer in existence, formed by the head of Trump's security team, was Global Governments. I mean, they were going around Washington inviting wealthy businessmen from construction firms and oil drilling firms to pay them like $16,000 a month, $6,000 a month, however much they could pony up, in order for them to guarantee that they would get contracts on the day after. And it hasn't happened. I mean, this has been going on for years, and they're just getting conned. So I wouldn't. I mean, did the U.S. get the oil prices down by stealing the oil from Iraq in an operation that was originally called Operation Iraqi Liberation, OIL, and it had to be changed by the Bush administration because it was too on the nose? Did they manage to get the oil out of Syria? I mean, they destroyed the Syrian economy, but most of the oil went out on the black market. And Donald Trump has publicly complained about that. I don't think they're going to get the oil out of Venezuela either. And just while we're talking about it, and while it comes to mind, another motivation here for Trump, I think for people in the NSC, and this is something that's shared by the Democratic foreign policy establishment, is that Lukoil and other Russian state-backed oil firms have deep investments in the Orinoco oil belt in Venezuela. And so the U.S. would like to, does see this as a means of weakening Russia and weakening Russia's economy, as well as weakening Chinese influence in the Western Hemisphere, as Venezuela has applied to be a member of BRICS, would love to be a member of BRICS. They were actually blocked by Lula da Silva, who pathetically and foolishly invited Argentina at the end of the Fernandez administration, the Fernandez-Kirchner administration. And then the next thing you know, Javier Milei is elected and they bail out of BRICS. That was another move which Lula made to undercut Venezuela. So there are so many reasons why they might want to do this, but I can't see them actually accomplishing anything other than destabilization, mass migration, and civil war.
Yeah, actually, what Lula did was unbelievable, and
Yeah.
he's right now concerned. Many people are concerned about the situation in Venezuela, Max, because they know whatever happened in Venezuela would influence Brazil directly, and not just Brazil, all the Latin American countries.
Colombia, particularly.
Yeah.
I mean, Colombia will be destabilized, and you have FARC leftist guerrillas who are aligned with Maduro on the border, who have pledged to defend Venezuela. So this could be destabilizing for the entire subcontinent. And yes, this will pour over into Brazilian territory. The U.S., there's no concern there, especially now that Brazil and Colombia have left-oriented presidents. I think the Trump administration would be happy to destabilize their countries.
Yeah. Max, I remember when Donald Trump came to the scene to be a politician, to be a presidential candidate, the watershed moment, if I remember it correctly, he was talking about the war in Iraq, and he was against the war in Iraq. And all the time he comes out, he says that he's against the establishment in the United States. Looking at what has happened with the Nobel Peace Prize and the rhetoric of the Trump administration, both at the same direction, regime change in Venezuela. Can we draw a line between Donald Trump and the establishment in the United States, or they're becoming the same, or has become the same?
I mean, the Trump administration has established itself as the dominant force in the Republican Party, which means Trump is the leader, or at least the face of one of the two ruling political mafias in the US at a time of almost unprecedented weakness within the Democratic Party. Donald Trump has managed to suffer punishing losses in last Tuesday's elections. And that's because the American public is being hurt by the affordability crisis while Donald Trump is hosting Gatsby-themed events at his Mar-a-Lago resort home. Donald Trump just made it impossible to file your taxes in the US online for free after getting $1 million donation from a tax company that charges people to do their taxes online. I mean, it's just out of control bribery at every level. And his promise was to reduce prices. And he brought over a segment of the American public that might have voted for a Democrat, including a figure like Bernie Sanders, because they just care about what we call kitchen table issues. But then within the Republican base, the hardcore Trump MAGA base, the people who rose up on January 6th, they expected an all-out war on the deep state. And instead, what they're getting is a revival of neoconservatism and Dick Cheney's greatest fantasies. I mean, Donald Trump indicted John Bolton, the self-proclaimed proud coup monger, while Donald Trump was fulfilling John Bolton's wet dream of waging a war on Venezuela. The Israel issue is a problem the US media refuses to acknowledge. It takes on this all-encompassing power among the younger members of the MAGA grassroots and kind of encapsulating the sellout and betrayal of Donald Trump of the America First movement, that he's under the control of a foreign country. So it's over. The whole concept of Make America Great Again and the red hats and Donald Trump's promises to end the wars and be a peace president, his claim that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, that's all been revealed to be a giant sham to anyone who's paying attention. But there's still a segment of the country that trusts and believes in everything Donald Trump is doing. There just may not be enough of them to even comprise the kind of plurality you need to deliver victory for your successor, JD Vance, someone who doesn't have the same charisma as Trump, doesn't have the same national name recognition or personal story, wasn't a TV star and the owner of football franchises, known in New York for owning glamorous gold-plated buildings. Like, I don't think the future is bright for their movement. And it really does boil down to certain issues the US media doesn't want to discuss. And I think we discussed them for the last 40 minutes or so. Everyone watching this understands the potency of these issues in the United States right now, but there are very few US politicians speaking to it. I would say two of the politicians who are speaking to it are Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They get it. They're coming out of the right-wing Republican grassroots. They were MAGA figures, and now they're under attack by Donald Trump's political network and by Israel. Thomas Massie faces an opponent who's being funded with $20 million from Likudnik Israeli warlord Miriam Adelson. Marjorie Taylor Greene is facing similar threats in her district in Georgia. So this just goes to show how sold out Donald Trump is, because these would be figures. These are figures who I think are expressing the original ethos and ideology of America First when Donald Trump first rose to the fore.
Yeah, he was attacking Rand Paul because of his comments on Venezuela.
Right.
This is literally one of the few Republicans supporting Donald Trump during the Russia Gate, and he doesn't care about it.
Yeah, and I mean Ukraine as well. Like, Donald Trump promised peace in Ukraine. He promised to solve it in a day. Of course, he wasn't going to be able to do that, but he's demonstrated very little consistency there, no patience for negotiation. And since the meeting in Alaska with Putin, he's sided with the Lindsey Graham faction of the GOP and is rearming Ukraine even as Ukraine continues to lose territory. So there's nothing left. There's literally nothing left of any of the promises Donald Trump made to be something different than the than the politicians that we have been cursed with through our reptilian duopoly.
The other case is the case of Syria. We had Al Jolani Al Shara coming to the United States, talking and meeting with Donald Trump. And what is the policy of the United States, Max, when it comes to Syria? Because Donald Trump was talking about withdrawing the troops from Syria. Right now, he's sending troops to Syria.
Yeah. I wrote this book, The Management of Savagery. It came out in 2019, and it predicted everything that's happening right now. The subtitle is How America's National Security State Fueled the Rise of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Donald Trump. And now the founder of Syria's Al-Qaeda branch, former deputy leader of ISIS, has met with Donald Trump in the White House and was granted a friendly interview on Fox News. I mean, how much more confirmation of my thesis, which was viciously attacked, not just by neocons, but by leftists, like the kind of people you see out in the left, like Owen Jones and Mehdi Hassan and that guy from Drop Site. What's his name? I always forget his name. But I was always under attack from them, from what I was saying about Syria. And now it's all coming home. It's literally coming home. The founder of Al-Qaeda is in the Oval Office. And it's because he was always there to deliver to the United States what it sought in Syria, which was the dissolution of Syria as the last independent, strong Arab state with an independent army and no IMF debt. Al-Shara has also met with the IMF and played basketball with U.S. military leaders. And the U.S. military will be given a presence in Damascus. But it's not just the U.S. military that has a presence in Damascus. The Mossad has been there. Israeli intelligence just walked right into Damascus and collected the former Mossad spy Eli Cohen's belongings. The Mossad spy who penetrated Syrian leadership during the 1967 war, cost countless Syrian lives before he was executed. They just walked right in with no resistance. This is the reality of Syria now. I've heard from Syrian sources that Israeli intelligence is like permanently based at the Sheraton in Damascus. Donald Trump, by the way, had promised to pull the U.S. military out of northeast Syria. But Syria is now going to become a base for the U.S. And why is it there? Because of Iran. This is a shared cause between al-Shara's Takfiri Sunni forces and the United States and Israel to neutralize Iran as a threat to Israel, or as a regional power. And this was all something that I could easily forecast in my book because I charted the whole history of the United States supporting Al-Qaeda going back to the 1979 intervention in Afghanistan, all the way through the proxy wars in Bosnia, Libya, and here we are. How did this happen? Does anyone wonder how this happens? Is there any question that U.S. intelligence has been supporting these organizations all along to deliver this very result, and that this will be a disaster for the region? No, but I had to withstand attack after attack for spelling it out too soon. I think that's the worst thing you can do in the United States, in the most propagandized country on the world, is to actually be right too soon. You can talk about the CIA and what it was doing 40 years ago, 50 years ago in the New York Times, but you can't talk about what it's doing today and what the result will be.
Before wrapping up, Max, since we talk about Syria, do you believe that there is some sort of ideas that Israel gonna attack Hezbollah and the United States may attack Iran? Is there any evidence, do you think, to support that, or Are we heading toward more conflicts in the Middle East?
Well, I think we have to assume that Israel's attacking Hezbollah right now. It's been bombarding southern Lebanon every day for the past 2 weeks. Will they stage an infantry invasion? Will they bring tanks into southern Lebanon, even in a limited fashion? I doubt it, because the Israeli military, these units are in disarray after Gaza, and Israeli soldiers are being paid enormous amounts of money just to stay in the field. As Israeli reservists are getting more money than the average Israeli worker gets from very hard work every month, and they're moving from unit to unit. The units no longer maintain the same contiguity. The Israeli public is exhausted from 2 years of genocide, and so what I think we're going to see is a kind of mowing the lawn operation against southern Lebanon with no regard for the ceasefire with Hezbollah. And what Israeli media has said is the reason Israel hasn't sought to target Naim Qassem, who is the Secretary General of Hezbollah, who replaced Nasrallah, is because they don't want the conflict to rise to a level where Hezbollah responds, because they assess that Hezbollah still maintains 20,000 rockets and missiles, which can do significant damage in the north to Israel and would put Benjamin Netanyahu's political future in peril at a time when the Israeli public wants to go back to some form of normal. So we're looking at mowing the lawn, the war between wars concept that Benny Gantz conceived when he was Israeli Army Chief of Staff. And that means war for the population of southern Lebanon, but not for Israel. Will this lead to a war with Iran? What will be the trigger point? I think Iran has established enough deterrence to make Israel think twice about that. But at the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu has shown that he considers his legacy incomplete until he achieves regime change in Iran. And Donald Trump has signaled to Netanyahu that Netanyahu can prompt or provoke the US to attack Iran by simply attacking itself at any point. So it's a dangerous scenario, and we should expect a resumption of conflict at some point before this isn't a prediction, but I would think the most likely point in which war with Iran would resume would be before the midterms. After last Tuesday's result, Donald Trump doesn't expect to do very well, and Netanyahu would see Trump as weakened and less likely to embark on a politically perilous war with Iran if Donald Trump took a whooping in the midterms.
Just before wrapping up,
I thought that was before wrapping up. The last one was before wrapping up.
Because I know
I feel wrapped up. It's becoming a hostage video, Nima.
But Max, the mayoral election in New York was raising a lot of question. What is Zohran Mamdani and who? Because on one side you see the people are going against, the Zionists are investing more than $100 million against him. On the other hand, you see the son of George Soros, somehow supporting him. Who's Zohran Mamdani, and what does it mean for the case of, if we assume, for the case of Israel and Gaza, if that could bring some sort of...
This is a big question. I've tried to answer it on our live streams at the Grayzone, and we talked about it, I think, last week. We'll see who Zohran Mamdani is. If he says he intends to have Benjamin Netanyahu arrested because New York will observe and respect international law. Netanyahu has an ICC warrant out for his arrest. Remember, Netanyahu called in the airstrikes to kill Hassan Nasrallah from his hotel room in New York, or approved them, and was approving airstrikes on Lebanon during a New York trip. So this is significant. We'll see if he fulfills it. New York has invested heavily in Israel bonds, which means that New York municipal employees have their own pensions invested in Israeli bonds, which have been downgraded twice since the genocide began. They're substandard bonds. He should get rid of them. Will he do that? He's already kept on the ultra-Zionist New York Police Department Commissioner, Jessica Tisch, who has been involved in escalating NYPD's relationship with the Israeli state through their liaison office in Kfar Saba, Israel. Will he get rid of that liaison office? I don't care about the rhetoric. I don't care about the pictures with Alex Soros. I knew he had a relationship with Soros. One of his key advisors, Patrick Gaspard, was the former head of Soros's foundation. That's all well known. But he's got to put his money where his mouth is. And that means taking action. And he will be tested because this whack job New York Assembly member, and her name is like Ina Verlikova. I forget her name. She's gone out to like public events wearing an Israeli flag as a skirt. She is just an absolute Likudnik fanatic. She announced that she will invite Netanyahu to New York on Mamdani's first day. So they're going to test him, and let's see.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Max, for being ready. I'm just you're a hostage. Great pleasure, Max, as always, talking to you and learning